Welcome to another Savor Newark, the podcast episode. Today we're going to be talking to my great friend Rafael Gandolff, originally from
Carlos.
Newark, an industrial hygienist that now finds purpose in promoting his community, making good use of digital marketing, although he doesn't consider himself a digital marketeer. He's still someone who truly is passionate about his community and wants to bring value and attention to the true critics of food, the food critics, and that role. Now, in this context of digital marketing, but never forgetting that purpose. So, how do you go from being an industrial hygienist to now having Brick City Bites and being quite successful at it?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think that it started with a fair amount of travel. So one of the big things for me was I think we were talking about this earlier. I worked for the Department of Defense early in life, and it took me to 35 different states over the course of about 4 or 5 years. One of the things that I did in everywhere I went, every city I went, was eat food. That was critical. One of the ways that I actually even, how should I say, one of the ways that I would justify the long hours was that at the end of the day, I would go and have a great meal at a place that I felt gave me some understanding of culturally what was going on in that city. So the first step for me, right, was, and this is a process of building knowledge around food and around the culture that is food, right? So first it was understanding the food of America, going around America and then sampling food in all these different states, all over the Southeast, the high desert. Then at some point, I started traveling a bit more. So at some point, work became a little bit easier and I was able to travel a bit more. Rather than having 5 days of vacation, I got 10 days, right? So it gives you a little bit more time to travel the world. I went to Greece, Morocco, Spain, Portugal. I've been in Colombia, Cuba 3 times, Guatemala, Belize, a lot of different countries, a lot of different cultures, even Germany, for example, just to get a different flavor of maybe what Eastern European culture feels like. So travel was very important, right? And then I've been in the kitchen for a long time. Although I'm an industrial hygienist, right? I have a master's in public health. I'm doing a lot, especially my job, right? I'm working for for an environmental remediation firm in their health and safety department. I'm managing the health and safety of about 110 employees who are all working at very contaminated sites. I still got to eat, right? It's like we all still have to eat, right? So one of the important things for me was understanding how to cook for myself, right? And then after you cook a couple things, you start getting interested in food culture. You start saying, well, okay, I'm interested in this now. I'm interested in this. Let me try cooking this Chinese dish. Let me try making this Vietnamese dish that, I'm interested in, that I want to maybe try. Maybe try this Middle Eastern dish or this Egyptian dish. So slowly what starts happening is I was actually building food knowledge, right? And starting to understand the more ethnographic, what people think and feel about the food that they eat. Building that knowledge over time led me to one maybe critical understanding. I kept seeing on social media a lot of different accounts that are promoting and marketing food. And one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of these influencers, let's call them that, they were clearly being bought. A lot of times the food that they were promoting in some cases just didn't even look good, but you knew that they were being bought for their message, for their purpose, for what they were saying. One of the things I started noticing, especially when I moved back to Newark, I'm a fourth generation resident, lived in Newark for about 13 years, moved away and then moved back in the last 2 years. A lot of the authenticity that I had seen in other cities, in other places outside of America, existed here in Newark. The same types of like authentic restaurants, the people eating at those restaurants were here. And all of a sudden, those experiences, things I'd seen throughout America, the things that I experienced in other countries, my own experiences in the kitchen, and then moving back to Newark made me realize there's something critical to document here. That this isn't just how should I say, like a very common thing, that this isn't just how should I say, you can find Newark anywhere. Newark really is different in the way that it presents food, the cultures that call this city home, and even the way in which it markets itself. It doesn't almost, right? It's like, hey, you got to come here to experience the food, be a part of the culture, go into the restaurants, be a little uncomfortable. Sometimes they're not going to speak English, but they'll make it out. And that's actually what led me to this point, right? Wanting to chronicle not only some of the things that I learned throughout my life, but also wanting to really understand and chronicle Newark as what I would call New Jersey's food city, right?
For people who don't know, and you touch a pretty interesting topic there, which Newark doesn't really market itself that much. And Savor Newark, the goal of, as you know, is an annual food symposium that now we have the podcast to keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
Although the event is our baby, but we feel that these conversations have to be continuous, right? You've been around. You're quite the global world citizen. How authentic? And you also grew up in Newark.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
you have a background, a Cuban Colombian
Yes,
background, which
yes.
we'll get there later. How authentic, for people who don't really know, how authentic do you think that the food scene in Newark truly is?
I would say that compared to any other city that I've seen in New Jersey, it is the most authentic food city. It's about a couple things. The amount of different cultures and people that call this place home, right? And that's going to be critical. So take, for example, Queens in New York. It's considered to have one of the most diverse zip codes with something like 80, 90 different countries all calling that one zip code home. I'm not sure, I might be getting the numbers wrong, but the point is that Newark, I think, reflects that exactly. That you have so many people from so many different cultures calling this place home, and those people need to eat, right? And they demand a certain level of authenticity. If you go into a restaurant, and this is something that, so I had a Korean friend when I lived in Philadelphia. We went into a restaurant with him. It was his first time being there. He was like, I want to try this Korean restaurant, come with me. We go in and he kind of looks around. I'm like, what are you looking at? He's like, I'm looking to see how many Koreans are eating here, right? Because if they're Koreans eating here and I see a lot of them eating here and
It's a
they're
good
like
sign.
Koreans, that's a great sign, right? And Newark has so much of that.
Newark is almost like if the name of the restaurant is the name that you can barely pronounce, and if they don't speak English, that's where you
Absolutely. The harder it is to pronounce the name, sometimes the harder it is to maybe communicate with the person, the better the food's gonna be. The better the food's gonna be. And it's something that I think, like some of my heroes, Anthony Bourdain, right? That's what he would tell you. He's like, go be a little uncomfortable. Go be a little uncomfortable because these are the people that you wanna interact with. These are kind of the secret food items of a great city. And I think that that's really what Newark has.
find comfort in an uncomfortable setup.
Yes, exactly. And I think that Newark people are warm, friendly, they're welcoming. And I think just like a lot of what I saw in other countries and other places, it's okay to fumble. It's okay to be a little uncomfortable. It's okay maybe to not get the word right, to maybe have the accent wrong. No one's gonna make fun of you. Everyone's money talks the same way. And if food is good, they're going to want you to have some of it,
Yes.
right? They're gonna want you to experience that element of it. So I do think that, like I said, Newark to me, I think there are some other great cities out there. Jersey City, I think, has a great food scene. Montclair is coming up with some phenomenal restaurants. But the question was authenticity, right? And when we're talking about authenticity, it goes back to that question of who's eating at those restaurants and who is the palate that the owner of that restaurant's designing their menu for. You see what I'm saying? That there's a very specific mindset that goes into designing food in a menu, right?
Yeah, and I feel that there's a few things. One is what you taste in Newark is not so much just the authentic flavors, it's the nostalgia and the family values and the traditions,
Yes.
when you go to Casa de Paco, for instance, and other restaurants. One of the panels that we've organized in the past had to do with Newark as the food route and the role of small businesses to keep this authenticity, right? So it's almost like the same dishes that they grew up sharing. Now they get to share with other families
Yes.
and welcome everyone. And there's a sense of pride. And when it comes to the Portuguese food, it's almost as if, and I'm Portuguese and I grew up in Portugal, so it's as if these restaurants are competing amongst themselves.
That's how it
Just
felt in Portugal when I was there.
to be the
Absolutely.
most authentic.
Yes. Yeah.
And in an era that everything is so superficial at times, and I understand why are you so
Mhm.
against the
The
the influencer
influencer.
kind
Yes.
based on
Yes.
why
Yes. What
you're
gives you the credit, the background, like anybody, for us to really be knowledgeable in any field, we have to have some experience, right? And we develop that experience with time.
mm-hmm. And you actually bring back let's just be uh, authentic, and let's just define the priorities
Mhm.
and the roles here
Mhm.
in terms of food critics. So what do you think that makes a food critic a good food critic? Is the fact that you've, in this case, in your particular case, the fact that you've been exposed to so many countries, the fact that you also developed some skills in the kitchen,
Mhm.
your curiosity.
I think it might be some of those things are important, but I do understand to travel the world, you need a bit of money. And that wasn't easy for me when I was young. Things get better with your career and then you're able to travel a bit more. In terms of being able to cook, I understand that not everybody's the greatest cook. Some people just get in the kitchen, you give them a cutting board, a vegetable, you tell them just cut this into 1 inch rounds, a cucumber, and they're gonna mess it up somehow, right? They're gonna give you wedges in some way, and you don't know how they did it. But it's the curiosity. I
Mhm.
think it's the curiosity and it's the willingness to understand and want to look into other cultures that are not your own. We understand American culture. I'm Cuban, I'm Colombian. My mom is so I'm a first generation Colombian. She was born in Colombia. My dad was born here, but my grandmother's from Cuba, right? But I'm very American. I'll tell someone clearly I am very, 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 I grew up in front of a TV with a Nintendo in one hand and a PlayStation controller in the other. It's like I'm a very American person, but my exposure has created a willingness, right? A curiosity, as you put it, which I think is a great word, to want to expose yourself to other cultures, to want to present that culture authentically in a way that is understood and appeals to the people, right? Because my version as an American of another person's culture, very important. What's really important to me is that that person, the people of that culture look at some of this content and they go, good job. Good
Mhm.
job. That's an accurate portrayal. Might not be 100% on point, but it's an accurate portrayal of how we feel about our food and about our culture. So again, I think it goes back to that sense of curiosity, that sense of passion and wanting to connect with other people and their cultures.
Mhm. You told me that of course you've traveled a lot.
Mhm, mhm.
What were some of the main countries that truly had a huge impact?
San Sebastian in Spain. So San Sebastian in Spain was I it was like out of the way for me, but I had to go drive there. My girlfriend at the time, just it was my current girlfriend, what am I saying? She was asleep in the passenger seat the entire time. It's 5 hours through the desert of Aragorn, and then you're going through the hills. The food was like for $7, the things that you could get, right? Like I remember getting this crab tartlet. They had these little baby eel, like, little bread, like they call them pinchos, right? Because in that part, the Basque call their tapas pinchos,
Angels.
right? So it was all these different pinchos, and the pinchos bars are like, it's like 12 of them all in a like 2 mile square radius. So you just go out every night, have a couple drinks, and then you go and eat food and try everyone's like different kind of pinchos. It was phenomenal. So transformed that transformed my idea of where good food happens. Because you'd go into these places and there weren't white tablecloths. Sometimes there weren't even tables. You're standing at a barrel, right? No tablecloth. There are no reservations. You got to elbow your way in, and they're serving food that here would be served at a Michelin star restaurant, right? Like the second or third time in my life that I had foie gras was at a Pinchos bar, and that was like an $8 dish with like a $3 pour of like local white wine, right? So this really changed my perception. Portugal is one of the big ones recently. Portugal and their understanding of the ocean, right? It's like I think the fact that it has so much coastline and their understanding of seafood, that was, I think, a really important trip for us recently, just being that I grew up in the Ironbound, right? So you get exposed to Portuguese culture And then all the dots connected about 2 years ago, right? So it's like, I lived here, I'd seen the food, I smelled the grilling sardines, every time the Portuguese Day, festival comes around, and I'm just like, okay, but I didn't get the connections. You don't put the connections together until you maybe go to like the South, you go to Porto, you check out Lisbon, and then eating some of the foods that, as you said, everyone is trying to create an authentic version of a dish that everyone likes. And it's something that I think actually something I would love to see happen in Newark. Restaurants have a dish that they're known for. You go in and you could get, right, they have a menu, but it's like they're known in the community for like one or two dishes, and you go there for that dish. I would love to see that in Newark. So Portugal.
I'm like that.
Yeah. Right. You know what I'm saying, right? Because what I envision, like, what would be great to have in Newark? A map that shows you these are the like in the Ironbound. These are your 30 or 40 restaurants. And if you're coming here,
It's over 100 restaurants.
exactly, right? So you envision 100 restaurants, and if each of them had 2 or 3 dishes, you're like, get this here. Definitely get this here. I think it helps really kind of codify the food language of the city, right? Starts putting kind of pen to paper in a sense.
There's a lot of things that obviously I admire you a lot. You're from Newark. Something about Newark that not everybody knows is Newark is really real. Newark in general.
Yes.
Newark doesn't need much to just be super cool.
Yes.
Doesn't need a cool waterfront,
Right.
or doesn't have to be Brooklyn. Although I like Brooklyn, I like
Love those
Jersey.
places. They're fun.
Love those places. Fun. But for instance, the mayor is a spoken word artist.
Right,
We have
right.
𝐒𝐄𝐃, which is a hip hop legend.
Yes, you can see Ras Baraka I've seen him more since, so I remember seeing him like before I moved back to Newark, and I was like, oh, cool. It's so interesting to see that the mayor is always kind of out there in the wild. Then I saw him out in the wild, right? That people are just out there.
I've interviewed the mayor for the Portuguese television back in the day in front of a Portuguese fish market.
Right. Right. That makes perfect sense. That's very Newark, right? It's like there is this like closeness and this sort of proximity that you get to have in a smaller city. And being that it's still close to New York, you get this big city and a small town vibe somehow put together. That's kind of, I think, what Newark is really kind of yes, the community. That's really, I think, what's really selling the city. And it's probably what has kind of kept it together through some of its more difficult times.
Yes, and during these artificial intelligence years and the advancement of technology, I think that the great message from Newark to the world is Newark reminds us of the importance of real and truly authentic.
Absolutely. And I say that because I've been to New York over the last couple months a few times. And every time I go, I realize that there is something critical that has been lost in New York City. Not in every neighborhood and district, but particularly like parts of Lower Manhattan. There was a certain realness, authenticity, the type of food you would get, the type of people that you would maybe see on the street, the types of businesses that were around and who they catered to. A lot of that's been lost. A lot of that has become catering to certain people, which is perfectly well and good, but you lose.
It lost its edge.
Exactly. You lose the edge. You lose that community, colloquial character that made people go there in the first place. And then what we're going to see, and I'm not wishing bad on anyone, but when we begin to change communities this way, what we see is when those people lose interest, when priorities change, that's when you start seeing these communities decline. It's actually the authenticity, the realness, those small mom and pop shop restaurants that have stuck through it the entire time. Those are the ones that in 100 years are going to still be maintaining those communities, right? So that's why I argue that it's really Newark that's almost sitting as like a last bastion of this style of keeping a city together, right? How do you modernize? How do you develop? There's a housing crisis in the city, but how do you develop, modernize, bring people to the city while maintaining that community and colloquial character? And that's probably the big question for Newark over, I think, the next 10 or 15 years. But I think that there are ways to do that. And I think some of what you guys are doing, some of what I try to do with Brick City Bite is to promote that authenticity so that it gets preserved, right? I want almost in 20 years, it would be great if someone looks back at what we're doing here Brick City Bite, and they're able to say, this is a great snapshot of what happened at that time, but we didn't lose it. We don't have to look at this as something like, oh no, this is a memory of something that's far gone. We can look at this as something that, okay, this was a moment in time where we started progressing an idea of how to create a real city, right? And how to create a community focused around things like food and an identity around food and around culture.
And your Brick City Bite, you come from a perspective of it's you giving back to your community. It's almost like you love Newark so much, you want the world to know, to taste what you taste, to see it through your eyes. When did you feel that that calling?
Yeah. So I had been admittedly thinking about maybe different ways of creating a sort of a food account, something to chronicle my thoughts, my ideas around food. I had already been kind of developing. I mean, I have like food favorite people, Jacques Pepin. I already mentioned
Bourdain.
Bourdain. He's a big one for me. There are a few others that I really like. Ferran Adria, who ran El Bulli in Spain. I mean, the mentality of these guys, I think, is great. But one thing that I realized, and this is something that I noticed, Ferran Adria, this is why I bring him up. Before he got 3 Michelin stars, before they had 1 Michelin star, they ran things as if they knew our food tastes great. You're gonna love it when you come here. We have to sell it from the beginning. And that was kind of my understanding of Brick City Bite, where I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm eating the food here. I've been coming to Newark for the last 10, 15, even though I moved away, my mom still lives here. My great grandmother lives here. My grandmother lived here for a while. My brother, my dad still live here, right? So I've been coming back and forth. And what I started realizing is that this city doesn't need to have, right, using the analogy, Michelin stars. It just does it every day because the people demand it. Good food, good attention, good service, paying attention to the purpose, just creating something authentic, something real, and giving people something that they really want. Realizing that that was happening in Newark and it just simply wasn't being documented in any way, that's when I was like, okay, here we go. That's the moment. This is a critical moment in history where I think that we have social media, we have technology, we have the ability to document these things. 30 years ago, I didn't have a phone to just chronicle everything that I wanted in like 4 HD, right? And now we have the ability to do that. We have the ability to chronicle what we're seeing, what we're doing in a much easier format. And I think that right now is a very critical moment, I think, to start documenting some of the stuff. Newark is very much a city in transition. And I think that, again, one of the things I was bringing up before, I want to preserve that food culture. Realizing that we have something special here, not wanting to lose it, that's I think the critical moment that made me, say, you know what, let me invest all the time and effort, the 4 hours that it takes per video to edit it, and then personally write the reviews because we don't use AI. It's not like I do research for the reviews. So if I've eaten at a restaurant and I don't understand their food culture, I look up the names and how things are created. I look at the history behind the food. Where did it come? I ate at Swahili Village recently, and all the food they're putting in front of us was Indian, but we're at a Kenyan restaurant. And I'm like, I asked the server, and he's like, oh yeah, there's a big,
They have curry. They cook a lot with curry.
yes, because the British,
Great food. I also like.
exceptional food, right? Again, Newark, right? You're sitting there and you're eating at a Kenyan restaurant, and then they're bringing out like what looks like Indian food. You ask your server, who's a South African guy, and he's just like, oh, well, yeah, it's because when Indian laborers came over during British colonization, the food mixed with African food. So Kenyan food is legitimately Indian African food to African people. African people legitimately consider this part of their food, right? I did a bunch of research and it was totally validated by the research. And then that's how I put these reviews together.
Yeah.
I get the research, I do the research, get some of the history firsthand, look it up to make sure, because I want to present an authentic version of what I'm seeing. And then I try to put it out there. And just as I said earlier, our mottos, focus on the food, not the influence. So I want to focus on who's making the food, what are people eating, how are they making it, what does it taste like, and trying to give people a real version of that.
Brick City Bite has been active since so long.
We actually only hit our 1-year anniversary September 2025.
Right. So it's
So
pretty
yeah,
recent.
it is very recent, and it's a very new thing. It's like I'm a scientist, like I'm a certified industrial hygienist. It's a branch of science where only 6,600 people in the world have this certification. It has a lower passing rate than the bar. So in 2024, I think the passing rate was like 48 or 47%. It's very difficult to get this certification. So my brain is hard. I mean, I'm also I'm a published researcher. I published my own paper in like lead and sampling soil in like parks, and like converted my back room into a lead like soil sampling lab, and like got the equipment from, it's like my brain is very hardwired for science. This has been very different, but I think it's that calling, that moment of realizing no one's documenting this. There's no Newark food account. You look at New York and there are tons of accounts. New York is oversaturated with people talking about the food going on within the immediate 3-block radius of where they live. And I couldn't find that in Newark.
Mhm.
Couldn't really find too many great examples of that where someone's doing it authentically and really wants to own in on the culture. And that, it's a couple of those things that came together. It was just like, I got to do this.
Mm.
Even if it's not successful, you do it for a year or two. And if it doesn't work, it works.
But it's being successful. And when did you feel that, this is actually really working?
So I was at the Portugal Day parade, I think this year, and I would say about 3 or 4 people, including one of the organizers, came up to me and they're like, "Hey, it's you." So me being me, I start like I'm like looking around. I'm like, "Who's this other person?" Right, and I don't realize, no, it's you. And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Dude, I follow you. Love your content. Really understand what you're doing. I love that you like focus on the food and you try to highlight Newark restaurants in a very positive way. You're critical, but without being mean." And I was like, "Whoa, like you're watching. You're so you understand the intent, you understand the purpose, and you care, and you're watching this." And it's like, yeah.
And not only that, you're thankful.
Yes, you're thankful. You saw me in public and you're just like, "Hey, thank you so much." It's like, what? That was actually, it was the parade after that. I remember the amount of people that had just, again, it's only 3 or 4 people, but that was like, I expected 0 ever. Like, it's like, that's just my pessimistic view on the world. And that was very enlightening to even talk to a couple people and be like, "Dude, why do you like this?" And it's like, I just moved to Newark, and honestly, great to have someone who's telling me about where to eat, what to look out for, what to try. And I was like, wow, that shows what I'm talking about, that Newark is very much a community and a city in transition. People are moving here from a lot of different and diverse backgrounds, and it's interesting to try to give people an understanding of where do you eat in the city?
Right.
Where do you go grab a good bite?
How has been your interaction with the restaurants? Are they very welcoming? At first, they're like, "What
So
are you doing? What is
they're
this for?"
they, in most cases, if I let people know what I'm doing, and I like to do it, I mean, it's kind of a chaotic process, admittedly, because sometimes I go in and I don't say anything. I just get a meal, I sit down, I start kind of just like, you know, taping my meal, I start kind of doing some content, and then at some point I start realizing, okay, this meal is pretty good. Then I start maybe bringing in people. Then I start asking questions. Then I'm like, because this is something that's happened to me before, you don't maybe want to introduce yourself. And I'm not saying any names, but there have been times where you go to a restaurant in Jersey, anywhere, you sit down and you're just like, "Hey, I'm doing all this content. This is going to be great." Then you get the food and you're like, "Oh, the food's not good." Doesn't happen too much in Newark, thankfully. But it's something that I always try to keep a little bit more anonymity and slowly try to warm up to their vibe, right? But overall, Newark,
You try the food, see if it's worthy of a Brick City
praise. Exactly.
a stamp of approval.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah, and then you try to warm up, and people are usually, so the one thing is that because I do speak a little bit of Spanish, my partner also speaks Spanish. It helps a little bit when there's a bit of
and
a
you also
language.
understand Portuguese.
And I understand a bit of Portuguese, as we saw this evening, but I try to, warm up to the person, try to talk to them. Even if there is a language barrier, we usually make it out. I mean, no one's clueless. They kind of get it. And what I do love is that a few places, and actually more recently, a good amount of places, it's really nice of them. They'll be like, "Hey, like, That's on the house. Don't worry about it. I went to a place, Cafe Avenida, right? So
One of my favorite.
they're considered, I mean, I'd heard about them for a while. They're ranked, they're on several lists, right? And it's like hard to find. It's a hole in the wall. You go in, they're the nicest people. The food is exceptional, right? It was easily one of the best octopus dishes that I've had. It's like that octopus, it's lagaredo, right? But it's like with potatoes, onions, olive oil, right?
Yes,
Garlic.
we also have the catfish lagaredo style,
Yes,
but
yes.
it's the octopus
Yeah,
version
yes, yes. So
with
exceptional.
the potatoes.
Yeah, the punched.
The punched
Yes,
potatoes.
yes.
Batatas amuro.
And what is amuro? Because
Muro is like a punch,
okay.
like
Cool.
potatoes punch
Yes.
style.
Yes, makes sense. That was an exceptional meal, and we're kind of making some content. We're obviously, and I call over the server. I'm like, this food is awesome. You guys are doing a great job. Prices are super agreeable. She comes over with a dessert tray, right? And she's just like, hey, so the chef is just giving you like any dessert you want. We're like, oh no, we're stuffed. And she's like, no, and just gives us her favorite desserts. And she's like, what do you guys want to sip? Have a little cocktail, an espresso. And it was just the approach of it, right? It's just like, hey, we appreciate what you're doing here. This is free promotion for us. And we get that. And we didn't have to necessarily speak the same language to understand the intent and to get that across. Great experience. Go to Cafe Avenida. As you know, but
I'm such a fan. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
I'm a personal friend of the family,
oh, really cool.
but I really love
Yeah.
their food in
Yeah.
terms of truly authentic rural Portugal dishes.
Yes.
In my opinion,
Yes.
you don't find
And the
anywhere else.
vibe, there's a vibe there, that you walk in and you're like, this is a cool vibe. Anybody, in the time that I was there, I saw a couple come in, a couple guys who are like your typical at the bar every day, either nursing the same beer or they only drink coffee and espressos, for a couple hours. There are people there that have with their families, and that's so Newark, right? That's one thing I love about Newark. You go to a restaurant's packed. You look around, there's a guy in high visibility clothing. He just got off the construction site. You see a family, they're celebrating their birthday. You see one group over here, there's a couple, they're having their second or third date ever and it's going great, right? You can see all these things in the same restaurant, and that's all considered part of Newark. That's just like, that's the vibe. That's the authenticity I think we're talking about.
As you were saying, Newark is also going through this transformation, and just a matter of what's going to happen within the next few years. How do you see the future for Newark?
So I think that there are two ways that this can go. And I say this because when I was living in Philadelphia, I was living in South Philly. And one of the things that I noticed about South Philadelphia was that there were some new developments, right? But one of the things that I realized was that they weren't necessarily developing new buildings. They had maintained a lot of home ownership. A lot of people had stayed in that area. So it was a lot of more renovations. They were maintaining the colloquial character of the community. And by preserving and helping the community, maintaining some of that character, you saw that South Philly had this authenticity. There was a restaurant boom. All of a sudden, one strip that was originally just like the strip for like casually shopping became, when I moved to Philadelphia, the forefront of the restaurant scene. And it was a strip with only 10 restaurants, but it just redefined the way people were doing food. You could get like exceptional French food at like a bar, right? And I do think that on the flip side, you have other parts of Philadelphia where they bulldozed entire city blocks, rebuilt them with something that looked new and fancy and flashy. And these are the same places where you go to a restaurant and you're like, okay, that was good. And then 8 months later, you come back, it's a new thing. And then you come back a year or two later, it's a new thing, right? I think that Newark has both those options available to it. I would love to see the style of development growth in Newark that still maintains that character, right? And I like seeing the like 4-story, 5-story. Newark does have the need for housing, so we need to develop new housing, and that's important. But maintaining some of that community character and finding constructive and creative ways to support the community, right? The community that's been here throughout those difficult years, and that's made it a desirable place to now come to. Supporting those people, I think, is going to go a long way. That's what I really hope to see in Newark, and I think that that's where we're going to have a lot of success. Really supporting the community, making this a city that's enjoyable to live in, but also enjoyable to visit for others to come and visit and to kind of experience what we have here. I think those two elements coming together are going to be our key to success. And that's what I really think, would work well in the city.
We've touched on a bunch of topics from authenticity, flavors, also sounds, music. You talked about the house music, which
Yes.
is such a
Yes.
big part of the local culture. What people
Absolutely.
don't even understand is that Newark plays such a role in terms of soulful house music. I
Yes.
understand that house music is Chicago.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
keep the status there. But in terms of the gospel and the soulful flair, it's definitely
Club
Newark played a
Zanzibar and
but
absolutely.
Newark played a huge role as far as that specific branch of house, the soulful house music. There are still some naysayers out there. You're from Newark. To all of those that still kind of are not in tune with what's going on, from not only the authenticity as far as the food scene is concerned, the restaurants, but also the arts. What message would you like? What would you tell them for people that are still somewhat skeptical as far as Newark is concerned?
Well, if you don't like it, leave it. No, I'm joking. No. I
Damn
think,
right.
right? No. I think that,
Naysayers that don't
Right,
live here.
right, that don't live here. I think that it's very easy to see the news and to say, okay, people are committing crime. They're always pointing to Newark. It's an easy target. Newark is an easy target in the same way that Camden and Patterson and a few other cities in New Jersey are. They're easy targets. If crime happens in other places in New Jersey, they're never going to report on it because no one cares. It's sensational to be reporting on Newark in such a way where it validates people's assumptions and their stereotypes, right? So there is an agenda here that I do want to kind of point out, that like it's fun to get in on the joke when it's Newark and some of these other cities. So I think that that's one element of it, is that realize that you're kind of getting in on a joke that's a very manufactured concept. Doesn't really exist. Newark, by all intents and purposes, is actually a fairly safe city. It's a fairly prosperous city in terms of fastest growing, in terms of, in a lot of ways, right? Education, development, I think the amount of people potentially moving here, and some of the potential that the city has to grow, it really is one of, I think, the most up and coming cities in America. And then I think likewise, this is a joke that me and my friends used to have. Any cool place in New York City, Philadelphia, and any big city, if you want to find out where the next big and up and coming neighborhood is, look for where Latin Americans, the working class, artists, poor people, where are they living? Where are they eating? Where are they working? That place in 10 years is going to be up and coming. They're going to buy it out. They're going to sell it because it has culture, because it has the things that we're talking about. So what I argue is that basically some of the things that I think make Newark kind of what it is, in some sense, has been turned into something negative in people's minds. But some of that stuff is actually really positive, right? The authenticity, some of the grittiness that I think people associate with Newark is what makes us the city that we are right now. And I think that you're gonna see like that other side of the coin, right? We've been looking at the tail side where it's like, okay, there's just some bad and there's some negative stuff. And I am saying this as someone who has lived here. My family still lives here. It's like I may be
You're
biased.
fourth generation?
Yeah, so fourth generation Newark resident. My great grandmother came here from Cuba, and then every generation has lived here. So it's funny, I lived here for up until I was about 12, 13, and then moved back because I went to boarding school. So I went to boarding school on full scholarship for about 3 or 4 years in Pennsylvania, lived in Philadelphia, and then I came back recently. And yeah, I mean, you're gonna see the heads side of that coin, right? Where all of a sudden you start realizing, oh wait, the proximity to Penn Station, the fact that so many cultures call this place home, the fact that you can be walking down the street and hear 10 different kinds of music coming from 8 different types of speaker systems. It could be the back of someone's bike. It could be the back of someone's car. It can be out of someone's window in a second, just like all these, as you said, the sights, the sounds, the flavors. These are the things that are actually going to bring people to Newark. In the same way that that's the stuff that brought them to the Village, to Chelsea, brought them to Brooklyn,
Soho.
brought them to Soho, right? So that's what I actually see happening. So I say to all those people, you wait. It's when we're really good at getting the last laugh. That's I think the way that Newark has been playing it for a long time.
Some people sometimes say that Newark is also the victim of being so close to New York City. To that, I feel that Newark offers something that you don't find in New York City, especially in terms of authenticity,
Yes.
especially in terms of certain ethnic foods.
Yes.
You don't find in New York
Yes.
the same level of authentic Portuguese food that you find in Newark. That's just an example.
Salvadoran food, Spanish food, Colombian food even. I think that Ecuadorian food, Peruvian food, there's a lot of different types of cuisine. Soul food, food from the South, Jamaican, African food, like Nigerian food. Right now in Newark, there are probably at least 7 to 10 different Nigerian restaurants. I actually saw content recently where someone was complaining, how many Nigerian, and I was like, Nigerian restaurants, that many? Yeah, there are that many here, right? So yeah, I do think that the variety is there. The variety is there. It's a pretty booming city. And I do think that there's a lot of different cultures here at play that make it a city worth kind of visiting, living in, and it keeps me interested. Honestly, you're always curious to see what's going to be happening.
What can we expect from you and Brick City Bite in the future?
So, we're starting a couple new series. One of the ones that came to mind recently, and this is a new endeavor, we're trying to visit the 16 remaining 24-hour diners in New Jersey. So post-COVID, pre-COVID, there were roughly 130 diners that were 24 hours in New Jersey, something like that, some hundred and something number.
Top's Diner used to be 24 hours.
Right. How many of these diners used to be 24 hours, right? And New Jersey's a diner state. We have the most diners. Currently in 2026, there are 16 diners that are 24 hours. So we were going to go visit all of them again to chronicle something that's truly authentic in New Jersey. It's a continuing theme, right? And then one of my long ditch projects is I've been talking to a couple people, just like restaurants, people that I've worked with, collaborated with before, on trying to get for the Portugal Day Festival a float that represents the food community and the food scene. Something that allows us to say, look, this is an important part of
Claim
Newark.
it.
Yes, and claim it, right? Because I remember seeing last year, there was a float where someone came by handing out like little sandwiches that were like laid out. They're like, actually, so
Like,
this is how, and I've been to Mardi Gras. So I see a float going by. There's a guy spit roasting an entire pig on a float. They're carving the like whole pig and then they're like serving it up on like little Portuguese rolls with like a little napkin. And I'm watching this and I'm just like, oh man, we got to do this. It's so New Orleans, right? The idea of like, it's not on a float and you're just waving to people, you're interacting with them, right? It's interactive and you're kind of getting in the crowd. So that's something I've brought up to a couple friends. Don't know if it's going to happen, but that's one of the ones that I would really love to see. And I think it would be a
so
good
instead of the beads, you're going for the
Yes.
sandwich laid
Yes, exactly. No beads. We're giving out laid out sandwiches. Absolutely. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think we're approaching. Is there any final thoughts that you would like to?
I think the last thing I do want to bring up about Newark is that I do think that it's a city that, again, is in transition. So it's not always the prettiest. It's not always the cleanest. It's not always a picture perfect city. But I think that that's what really gives us the opportunity to start creating something really special and enduring here, especially with the food scene. And that's really the whole purpose of Brick City Bite, to create an enduring understanding of the food community and the culture here. And I invite a lot of other people to do that in their own lives. Go to the restaurants that you like. Go to the hole in the wall spots, patronize them. They need your business. These restaurants are currently struggling. Make sure that you maintain the culture, the businesses, and the restaurants in your community that you want to see there 10 or 15 years from now.
We're talking also to people outside of Newark, but I also feel that even people that live in Newark, some of them don't realize the great gems that we have
Yep.
in Newark.
The cultural gems that exist here. I mean, it's easy. It's like, you envision if you had a national monument right down the street from your house and you drove by it every day, after a while, you're just like, oh, that's just a national monument. For someone who's never seen it before, they maybe live in the same country as you. They go there like, oh my God, that's the national monument. Well, you drive by it every day, so you don't really pay attention, right? That's Newark for some people. They just drive by it every day. So they're just like, that's just Newark. And it's like, have you been to other places? Like this is really different, and this needs to be preserved.
Newark might not be the prettiest, but it's arguably the tastiest.
There we go.
Thank you so much, Rafael,
Thank you,
for being
Carlos.
here. How can people follow you and support you?
So we are on Instagram, we're on Twitter, and we're on YouTube under Brick City Bite. We are putting out content, at least 3 videos a week, and we try to focus on a few different series: affordability, dining at night, and then a few other series, as I said, our diner series. And yeah, just follow us, comment, like, and share. We really appreciate the stories. When I'm reading comments, I appreciate the thank yous and the great jobs. But when someone gives me a memory, I posted a video recently about Fuddruckers, and someone posted that for 10 years, they went to that exact Fuddruckers with their family, and they would stay too long, and it was annoying, but it's the memory. And reading that, I love it. So watch us, post, comment, and leave some great stories. We love hearing that stuff.
Very good. Don't forget, Savor Newark this year is going to take place on May 16th. Rafael is going to be there. Don't forget to follow at +_PR, Savor Newark, and we'll see you next time.